Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I am joined today, and it's been ages since I've talked or seen her, Dr. Susan Nash, good friend. How are you, Susan?
I'm great, and it's great to be here, and I'm so happy that you're here, and we're talking together.
Yeah, it's been too long. It's been between we were traveling, you were traveling, and we weren't coordinating our schedules, so finally back. And anyway, we've got a great guest today. Would you like to introduce him?
I would. His name is Patrick Ng, and he's with Real Core Energy. And he's here today really because I'm such an admirer of his work in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and I thought that our listeners would really enjoy what he has to share.
Welcome aboard. Patrick, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about your history? How did you get started in oil and gas? And also, how did you get started in machine learning?
Well, maybe simple. I trained as a geophysicist, and over the years, my experience went from A to C. So let's say from the A's, amplitude versus offset to reduce width, and then later transform seismic data to rock properties, and then help imaging reservoirs of salt so that we can find these giant, and actually leading to 3 giant discoveries in Gulf of Mexico, over 2.5 billion barrel oil equivalent. So more recently, I put all that into work and learn from the wells, drilling wells, and learn from the drill bits. So all the way to the total depth. So that's the need. Now, what I thought, how do I get into machine learning and all that? It's simply for one reason. The data that we use. So a lot of times, what I learned from drilling well is we don't drill average well. It's a spread. So the risk is in, well, can we anticipate what the spread may be, and so therefore we can better manage. So from that, I investigate and certainly get into data analytics, and machine learning seems to be a really useful thing to do, to at least get a better perspective of what the risk profile might be. So that's kind of my short introduction.
Patrick, how do you define or what is actually meant by, because we know we talked about artificial intelligence, but how is machine learning apply to artificial intelligence, and what is the machine learning?
Oh, maybe let me give a couple examples. So, for example, we have a lot of time we got geophysical data, and obviously many years people interpret them, identify pattern, and come up with ideas where the oil and gas might be. Now, one of the things that machine learning can help is that these patterns that sort of can produce from past experience, train the algorithm so that they'll be able to look at other data, other areas, and maybe come up with a prediction of what that geology might be, therefore the potential for oil and gas.
Interesting.
So that would be one example of machine learning. There's maybe some others. But the other part, if you talk about artificial intelligence, maybe a little bit different take is that, hey, a lot of time if I look at an opportunity, I look at a prospect and figure out is it something reasonable risk or high risk? Well, there might be a simple thing using the machine to go back and look through the data and come up with some kind of estimate probability. So that could be a pretty straightforward, simple application of AI.
Okay, so the machine is taught to analyze the data and be able to make decisions based on that data.
Or at least make some prediction or probability of what that outcome. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Is
That's
that used?
good. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Susan?
Well, that reminds me of an event that we had a few months ago in Houston where it was called a hackathon. And what it was a competition where people came together and programmed in Python, and they used real data sets to predict the flow from a reservoir. And so if they could predict the flow of oil and gas from a reservoir, they could make better decisions. And Patrick, would you like to tell us a little bit about how the hackathon came about and what it involved?
Well, certainly, Susan. If I recall, it was simply the starting point as to use science or geoscience, a way to develop, maybe improve the ability to forecast production of oil and gas flowing from a well. So based on that, the way it's structured is with a data set that, courtesy of Halliburton, they provide that as a benchmark, and also maybe a Python notebook. So for people that are familiar with that, that's great. If not, we actually have a little boot camp before the hackathon to get people up to speed. So what we do in the hackathon is that let's experiment. So let's say in neural network or some of these popular machine learning algorithm, you take a basic algorithm, a structure provided, but then you start playing with it and start tweaking or maybe adjusting the number of layers or the number of neurons. So you can see if you can actually improve the forecast from that exercise. Now, where does it make the difference is, well, if we use some of the geoscience principles, can we actually make the result, improve the result? So that was the gist of the hackathon. Mm-hmm. And there was no one single answer. So there were like 12 teams in that, and I think there were quite a number of different approaches, but it was a learning experience. Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely. It was fun. And one thing that I would like to ask you about is, how do you think that machine learning can make oil and gas production safer and cleaner?
Susan, could you repeat the last sentence?
How can machine learning make oil and gas production safer and cleaner?
Safer
cleaner.
and cleaner.
Green, clean.
Oh.
Yeah, free and clean, safer and cleaner. I can only speculate two aspects of it. First, if you could use machine learning to for predictive maintenance, that means ahead of schedule, kind of figure out when you might need to have some repair or maintenance done to keep it in top shape, running properly. So that will reduce the risk of perhaps a mechanical failure or risk of outbursts or something that leak out. So in that sense, yes, good maintenance, just like our AC system here in Houston. I mean, we do want to have regular maintenance, keep the thing running in top shape, minimize surprises. And the other part is that, so that's maybe safer, cleaner, but the other one perhaps is that, hey, if we are so successful of, let's say, improve the accuracy, predictability, where we place a well so that we can get the most maximum production, maybe we do drill fewer wells. And if we do that, hey, lower the cost is great, but also less, reduce the footprint that might impact the environment. So that would be my perspective.
I like that.
Does it make sense? We're not
Absolutely.
there. We're not there. Do plenty of work to do.
Well, we're getting there. Yes. Well, and the other thing I think that is really interesting about machine learning is that it allows us to go back to old data and reprocess it. Have you done any of that, Patrick? Reprocessed old data using machine learning?
Well, two things. If you talk about reprocessed data in the geophysical world, that is a lot of time the so-called pretty much best practice. So every so often, new technology, whether it's from imaging or from detailed and analysis, you can extract information. So people do. So that's a pretty standard business practice. Where machine learning fits in is that now, if you, for example, there are cases where you could have the ability to improve the resolution. So by that, simply hey, in the past, maybe because of the way the algorithm works, I can only get maybe a field description, something like in the range of like 80 to 100 feet. But now today, I can maybe improve, like your high-def TV, go from 4K to 8K. Maybe you see a lot more detail. So it gets that resolution down to maybe 40 feet, or maybe next round 20 feet. So every time you can do that, yes, then you could say, hey, I can retrain whatever algorithm, machine learning that I'm thinking, so it has been doing well. I can retrain it with improved data, and maybe I can actually improve even the so-called prediction result. So that's definitely a good thing to do.
Patrick, what kind of programming languages are used to create this kind of AI, the machine learning?
Oh, now, of course, I'm not a trained computer scientist, but Python is my choice. Okay. Well, it's not just Python, so maybe let me qualify. Python, I guess, is like if I need to go to France, maybe, hey, if I really want to enjoy all the beautiful French country living, and I want to learn French. Mm-hmm. So, for example, Python is a language, but the power is not because just of Python, the language. It's because all the libraries that comes with it. So, for example, it's okay to kind of picture if I'm starting programming, here's what I might do. And I'll give a little bit of comparison versus using these libraries. I can do so much better, faster, and so forth. Is that okay?
That's okay. That's interesting. I remember when I was going to college, in terms of AI languages, there was Forth, Lisp, Prolog, and you don't hear about them anymore. Now I'm hearing a lot about Python, Visual C. So it's changed. It's interesting. I guess it's become easier.
Well, maybe let me summarize in one thing. Python, if we look at foundation, I guess my teenage daughter, she's doing makeup, so I kind of think of, foundation. You can use it, and then you can, for different occasions, you can put on other things to whatever to make it fit. So Python's foundation, and there's a library called, I guess, a numerical intense application, NumPy. Yep. So just as an example, so Python, a language, you think of early days, you might say you want to do something. You start with a loop. So you start here, you do certain things, and you go through, let's say, a sequence of things. So for each one of those, you index into maybe a particular list of things to do. So you go through at least 2-3 lines of those. Now, in the numerical Python NumPy library, well, it treats these as the idea of a vector or an array or something. So instead of going through each index into individual element, you can just say, hey, this thing is a vector. I can do it once and do the whole thing from start to finish of the entire, let's say, array. So it becomes one line. So think of it from a perspective of programming. It's really nice to be able to do that. Now, go further. Then there's another library that, like in the geophysical world or in the oil and gas. So, for example, I got 1,000 wells. And each well, I have a production history, a production profile. That for oil over a day or over an hour, over a year, whatever the time scale. You think of it as a lot of curves. So I got 1,000 of them. Now, if the question is, hey, I want to be able to do some statistics over them, operate something on them, and smooth certain things out, so I can kind of get a sense of different quantiles, and what's the top 20% of these, the best production, the best producing wells versus the bottom 20%. Well, in Python, there's a library called it's almost like Pandas. It's called Pandas, Pandas. What it does is it gives you the ability to take all the data in as one, treat it as a bunch of wells. You can think of it, it's like you have 1,000 wells, 1,000 columns. So along the vertical axis is all these numbers, that your production history. So you just use that library and treat this whole thing as one object. And so when you say, hey, take an average of them, you just say one line. You get the whole average of the entire thing. Or it starts giving you the quantile, the top 20%, and middle 20%, or the bottom 20%. So you get a quick sense of, hey, what kind of variability is in your in these 1,000 wells that you have. So it's very powerful.
That's fascinating.
So it gives you the ability to use these other libraries associated with to do a lot of things better, faster than you have to do it on your own every time.
Yep, and I imagine that as things change and evolve, it's easy to modify the libraries and the data, and your foundation's still intact. Nothing's changed.
Well, that's exactly, so I talked about there's a numerical Python library, then the pandas allows you to take a lot of these rows and columns, and like big spreadsheet-like thing, and do it very well. Well, in fact, the machine learning aspect is that, well, after the Python, it has another couple of libraries, but basically one of those is called Keras, and then TensorFlow, the one that Google released only last November. So they're all using Python underneath, but they are just like a more high-level thing, so you can do things within a few lines. So, for example, in the past, you have to build a deep learning model. I guess deep meaning many layers in the neural network. So let's say Microsoft has done some of these 158 layers, and they claim to be really good. So you have to do 158 layers. Well, in one of these, like a Keras, which is KERAS, it's a high-level neural network language. So let's say, for example, minimum for each layer you have to have one line. So if you got 158 layers, you got to have 158 lines, or at least you have to specify. So yeah, that's doable. But in TensorFlow, for example, the one that came out from Google November, well, it's one line, but it's a long line. But at least you can, within the one line, you can specify in each one of those 158 layers how many neurons you want. So you can see all that is making it really, really compact and quick for people to experiment. And again, that's like using a lot of default, whatever setup. But if you want to go back and then tweak it and customize on your own, then you can certainly do that. And so the Python allows you to, at a very high level, you do that, or versus you get down to very fine-grained detail as well. So that's my impression, and that's why I find it a tool of choice.
That's great. Now, you mentioned you have a teenage daughter.
Yeah.
Is there any artificial intelligence that can help a teenager today?
Well, okay, maybe not so much exactly machine learning, but I did put together a couple of a simple thing, like I talk about, what's the probability, when people talk about oil and gas, a lot of times they talk about P10, P50, P90. Basically, what's the 10% likelihood that I get something really big versus, half the time I get that, or versus 90% confidence I'm going to get it. So I did put a little bit of Python, but using the numeric computation that is under Alexa. So it's voice. So I guess, before I wasn't so cool, the way my teenager look at it. But Alexa, she go and she put on her. Oh, hey, there you go.
That's
you can
That's cool.
In fact, if I think, Susan, AAPG, we want to develop next generation geoscientists. And I think if we think of high school, maybe Alexa, one thing we can get them excited. Hey, geoscience doesn't have to be boring. Field trip, exciting for some, looking at outcrop, but, Alexa could be a good way to get them energized.
You're totally right. And the other thing, too, that I'm noticing is that the people who are getting new jobs, they are changing their profile in LinkedIn, and they're saying that they are, on the one hand, a geologist, and the other hand, a data scientist. So we have people who are like hybrids. It'd be nice to have Alexa in there somehow, too.
Well, let me be on that one thing. Now, my belief, even I'm excited about the potential, the opportunity machine learning can bring, and all this other. I think it's important to just put things in perspective. I believe learning with the machine always beats machine learning alone. The simple fact is that I observed, Susan, maybe you went on field trip. Geologists, they went to the Midwest, they go up to the Rockies, the Grand Canyon, and look at the outcrop, and they can think of, and then they can develop what's the so-called the geologic model for deep water, for the things that 45,000 feet underground, and drill these deep wells. But some of that concept come from, they relate on an outcrop, looking at rock samples to what they need to do in terms of drilling a well. So now that is a high level of learning. It's just that they translate, geologists might translate the data, observation that from the field through the gray matter, some kind of learning into a geologic model that works. Right? Now, the thing is, you have to drill the well and prove it. So let me. Earlier there was a question, I believe, about reprocessing. So here's an example. Before 1995, all the geology textbooks would describe Gulf of Mexico in terms of, underneath the ocean floor, another certain depth. There are a lot of salt bodies. These are big salt, not the salt that you when we eat. The big salt bodies. But at the time, the way physics, you think of buoyancy. You say, hey, the salt, the density is lighter than the surrounding rock. So these salts, they move up. At the end, now, of course, we're talking about geologic time scales. So we're talking about millions of years, not like in days or weeks. But over time, what these salt bodies is, they'll be like septic. Think of lava lamp. Remember those lava lamps?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like lava lamp. A bunch of these salt bodies would be popping. They're detached from whatever the deep source it is. All right, so from all the way through 1995, that's what people do. And also the way they look at the data, the 3D seismic data required, whatever the technology at the time, we don't really see anything below the salt dome, so a lot guessing, but that's the model. Well, until, at the time I was one of the leading geophysical companies. We were working with BP, and we were doing some of these, developing the idea, the algorithm, and the data. And, for example, we realized, hey, some of the salt actually, a little cupcake, it actually goes down, it's like a salt mountain. It goes all the way 45,000 feet deep. So what happened is that it took that one discovery, I think at the time it's called Crazy Horse, but now it's called Thunder Horse, and that proved it. Now, a long story short, if the concept the geologists did not come up with, and of course it's based on some other geologic concept, which is totally independent of the data, and then we use it to drive the model building and the algorithm, and then you get image. So this is the part where I think is the difference between the kind of data that we use in oil and gas. If I change the model, I'm talking about Earth model or geologic model, I actually change the image. So you could think of is something that a typical, let's say in the consumer social media world, let's say I'm thinking Amazon. I bought all this stuff on Netflix, I check out all these movies, I actually done it, So the data model still is based on actual direct what I did, what I saw. But in the geologic, in the geoscience world, some of this, the data and the model are intertwined. That means I change the geologic concept, the algorithm, same data, but I can come up with a different view. So that's where machine learning could be useful, but it has to be said, it's not the only thing. You have to have the ability to learn with the machine so that you can improve the understanding of, come up with a better geologic concept, and then maybe you can get to the better stuff. So that's my experience.
I think that's great. And we are almost out of time. But Susan, would you like to ask your final question?
What is this?
Well, he can't see that.
Well, I'm just showing a map, and it has a lot of faults. I was going to try to find a picture of a salt dome that looks like the lava lamp concept that Patrick was describing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I just wanted to say that, I like the fact that machine learning is a lot like the facial recognition that we use machine learning for is used to recognize structures and things in the subsurface as well. So, it's just all about patterns, and it's kind of interesting. But we have to be careful how we train it. So you can train it to, on the wrong model, and that I think is kind of a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. Anyway. final thought. That's all I had. I think Patrick has really been on the cutting edge of this, and it's really great to talk to him.
It is pretty fascinating. Do you want to ask our normal Life Edge question?
All righty. Okay, Patrick, are you ready for this? What do you think in your life? Okay, so here we go. Patrick, in your life, other than Alexa, what is it that has given you an edge?
And by an edge, she means what has made you successful?
Well, I don't know
Or given you
how you success, but when I look at machine learning, simply is that, like this old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begin with one step.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I embark on this, it's just I try Python, and then next thing I try, I see it helps and all that. So my view is that, hey, it's a tool, and I think that geoscientists can really embrace it and go much further, develop maybe better insights. So that just do it. I think that would be my take.
That's great. And the beauty of what you're doing is that as you're learning, it's learning, and new possibilities come up from the learning. So very exciting.
Yes. In fact, last thing I want to add, Python allow me also, it's a different library called Flask, but with that, then I can also use it to get to Alexa.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is.
So I hope that get people excited and trying it out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities really, like you said, are endless. One thing leads to another, which is what's exciting.
Well, at least you can test to your own mind. What is in your mind, you can put it to test using data and check and rather than,
yeah. Yep, that's great. Well, Patrick, we really appreciate you coming on today to talk about your research, what you're doing, and how it's coming to life. I think it gives people an idea of some of the things going on out there, which they have probably no clue about. So that's fascinating. So thank you.
Thank you for putting it together. Thank you so much.
Oh, appreciate it. And if you're watching, please subscribe. Let us know what you think. We'll have information on Patrick in the show notes below, and we'll see you next week on Life Edge. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Rick.